Most people, probably including yourself, are very easy to manipulate. In this video, I'm going to give you the 3 golden rules that will help protect you from manipulation and make you harder to influence. Now, I meant what I said before when I say most people are easy to manipulate. Most people think that they're not, and that's actually one of the things that does make them easy to manipulate. Very few people have had the professional training and been given the tools and techniques needed to actually keep themselves safe. Thankfully, with just a few changes to the way you interact socially, you can protect yourself a whole lot more. So today I'm going to talk about 3 particular things that can help build a protective fence around you to protect you from manipulation. Those 3 things are: everybody has a primary motivation. So understanding why someone's doing what they're doing can help you be more skeptical about their intentions towards you. Second one is that words are like computer code, that your brain is essentially a big computer and words are code that program it. So you cannot stop yourself from being influenced by words, but you can choose how you react to that influence. And thirdly, you are always at risk of being manipulated. There's no such thing as a person who is immune to manipulation. So having that humility and that understanding about the risk that you're at will help you manage it. We're going to go through each of these 3 in detail to help you apply it practically. And in case you don't already know me and don't know where I'm coming from, I spent 7 years working in the Department of Corrections, and my specialty was working with high-risk, highly manipulative psychopathic offenders. I've had all the top training from all the experts around the world on how to keep yourself safe against such people, and so if it works with them, it's going to work with everyday people extra well. Video is not telling you to be highly suspicious and skeptical of everybody and every interaction, because it makes it really hard to function and build a relationship. But this is more about just occasionally checking in when things feel wrong, or during situations when there's a higher risk of manipulation, like conversations with your boss, or working with a salesperson, or being with a partner during an argument. So number 1, primary motivation is the key. Before you even start interacting with someone, even if they're brand new to you, you should be able to make a reasonable guess as to what their most likely primary motivation is going to be. And you want to be able to decide this before they start interacting with you, before their words get in and start changing your reality. See, most people are pretty predictable if you just look at them objectively. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, what's the most likely thing they're going to be trying to achieve in this interaction? And the answer should be pretty obvious if you just apply a bit of detached logic. Look at the person for who they are on the outside and make some guesses. For example, if they are a career politician, then their most likely motivator is going to be self-preservation and maintenance of their power. Their most likely motivation is not going to be your best interest, unless that happens to be in their best interest. If the person is your mother, the most likely motivation they're going to have is to try and control you so that they feel like a good mother. If they're your boss, the most likely motivation is to either further their own career or make a profit for the company. Now, this doesn't mean that people can't have other motivations and that people can't be kind and compassionate. It's just you've got to start with a kind of detached, most likely estimation of their primary reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And when you keep that in mind, you'll be a lot more skeptical about what they say, and you'll also be able to see clearly that they're one of the exceptions. For example, if you have a mother who says, you know what, you just do what's best for you, I'll support it, you can be like, okay, that's quite exceptional from the most likely motherhood kind of intention. Or if you have a boss that actively helps promote you, even though you're the high achiever in his team and he seems to be more interested in your career than his team's performance, you'd be like, okay, that's an exception. Or if you have a politician who deliberately loses the vote to make a stand on integrity, well, then you've got an exception, a very rare one. But what you've got to ask yourself is, have I actually seen long-term patterns of exceptional behavior away from the most likely intention? I don't mean the odd little piece of virtue signaling, but long-term, consistent behaviors that make you think, okay, this person is different to the norm. And if you don't really have much evidence either way, your safest bet is to ask yourself, what is their most self-serving motivation? Humans are inherently self-serving. That's not the same as selfish. We're not out to hurt others for our own gain, but everything we do is somehow rewarding to us. So you could ask, what kind of reward are they seeking? Some people might even be self-sacrificing, but their reward is actually feeling like the hero victim who self-sacrifices. So they're not actually sacrificing shit, they're getting their needs met. And I see this quite a lot. So before you interact with someone, just ask yourself what's their most likely motivation and set that as the kind of anchor, the suspicion you're going to have going in, with an openness to change your mind with exceptional long-term patterns of behavior. And especially when it comes to situations where somebody gains something from you, like in a sales call, you have to assume that even if they appear to have your best interests at heart, their most likely motivator is whatever's best for them. Number two, words are poisonous fumes. A person's true nature is revealed by their long-term patterns of behavior, not what they claim to be, not what they promise to do, not what they said they did, but what they actually do repeatedly over time. And it's actually one of the hardest fucking things to measure because words get in our head and confuse the story. You think about how many of you have been betrayed by someone repeatedly, and yet they kept saying that they're your best friend and that they love you and that they want what's best for you. And you got this like mixed message. You're like, oh, I think they're kind of a good person trying their best. And yet, if we were to isolate their behavior and just look at that, you'd see somebody who doesn't respect you at all. So words have an effect on your memory of a person and your image of who they are in your head. And you have to keep that in mind. You can't trust yourself to process words accurately and to see the difference between words and behavior. At least you can't trust yourself to do this as a default. It's something you have to manually override. One of the things to look out for is somebody claiming to be something. An honest person doesn't need to tell you that they're an honest person. Your friend doesn't need to remind you that they're your friend. A person of integrity doesn't need to make promises. They just deliver. So whenever somebody says, I am this and I've always been that and so on, ask yourself, why are you trying to convince me of that with your words? Your behavior should have convinced me already. You shouldn't need to say this. When somebody says, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again, I promise, the only thing that really matters is that they did do it. The apology is not evidence of anything. The promise for future behavior change is not behavior change. Now, if they do go ahead and change their behavior, great, you measure that. But at this point, at the point where they're apologizing and promising to do better, the only thing you know for sure is they have harmed you. And that's the only thing that needs to be measured. Remember, promises are worthless, and they're one of the most overused manipulative tools, apologies and promises. Apologies are used in place of reparation. So I say I'm sorry, so I don't actually have to clean up the mess that I made. I just use a word as if that does anything. And promises are a way of making you think I'm a good person before I've actually done anything. It's a way of kind of like selling you a product and you haven't even seen the product or tested it out yet. So be very suspicious of people who are apologetic and make a lot of promises and ask yourself, if I put that aside and look at what they've actually done, what kind of person do I see? Because whatever they've done in a long-term pattern is what they're most likely to do again. If your partner has cheated on you 3 times and they promise not to do it again, the most likely thing is they will do it again. If your friend says sorry for being late to the party, you think, oh man, they're really remorseful, they regret this. And then you look at their long-term pattern and they're late for everything, most likely they're going to be late again. The apology means nothing. Remember, a person of integrity doesn't need to apologize or make promises. If they hurt you, they'll fix it. All right, they'll do that with behavior. If they cost you money, they'll pay you back. And they don't promise anything for the future. If they mean to correct their behavior, you'll just see a correction in behavior immediately. They don't need to promise that it's going to happen. Especially if someone says something like, I love you. That one is used a lot by people who actually behave quite badly. Do they need to say I love you if they've been behaving consistently lovingly? Probably not. They wouldn't need to remind you of it because their behavior would tell you every day. So when somebody says that they love you, partner, friend, family member, look at the way they treat you and go, is that what I'd call loving behavior? If the answer is yes, then they don't need to say I love you. If the answer is no, the same applies if someone says you can trust me or I'm just being honest with you. Are they? Or do they say that to counteract patterns of their behavior that say the opposite? Just remember, even if somebody is lining up their words with their behavior, when somebody tells you that they are something, when somebody uses words to convince you of what's true, then that's their intention. They're trying to convince you that this is true. Now, it might be because it is true, or because it isn't, but they want you to believe it is. And their behavior will tell you which one it is. The third one, don't trust anyone, not even yourself. Trust is a very strange concept. Trust is, I predict that your behavior will be something in the future, and I believe my prediction. That's what trust really is. The belief that you can predict someone's future behavior. Isn't it an odd thing to rely on that? Your ability to predict the future. You say, oh, John's a good guy, you can trust him. What you're saying is John will continue to be a good guy into the future. I've got a crystal ball, it's definitely going to happen. But if you've been manipulated by someone into thinking that they're a good person, then how does that affect your ability to predict their future behavior? You're going to be quite inaccurate, aren't you? And yet in your mind, they are a good person. So how do you know the difference? You don't. People feel so shameful when they get betrayed. They feel ashamed of themselves. They're like, oh, I thought he was such a good guy. I'm such an idiot. No, you're a human being who can be manipulated. That's all of us all the time. Everybody can be manipulated. And we're manipulated because we believe in trust. We believe that we're able to read people accurately, measure them accurately, and predict them accurately. And we are wrong on all of those. But you believe that trust is needed for a relationship. Well, there's two types of trust. Okay, there's the trust that comes from thinking someone is going to behave a certain way in the future, or measuring what they've actually done and seeing consistently good behavior. We don't need to predict what someone's going to be like in the future. We just measure how they've been in the past. That tells us all we need to know, because the most likely thing with human behavior is that people are going to repeat themselves. So if someone's broken promises in the past, they're probably going to break them in the future. If someone has always stood up and protected you when times were tough, they're probably going to do that again. So we don't need to predict the future. We just go, have they treated me well, consistently? Are there long periods of good behavior? And am I doing something to try and ignore the exceptions? Have I seen red flags and I just don't want to think about it? Have there been times where they've really let me down and breached boundaries, but I dismiss it because most of the time they're good? These are the kind of hard questions you got to ask yourself, because you're going through a process all the time to fuck with your own memory, to avoid confrontations, to avoid the fear of being alone. There's a lot of things you do to avoid acknowledging that people don't treat you well. Manipulation really requires that you are unwilling to assess your own ability to judge people, that you're unwilling to admit that you could be manipulated. Any sort of criminal offender who's been in prison will tell you the easiest guard to target is the one who thinks he can't be got, right? That one can be moved easily. It's the one who doubts himself to the right degree, like, you know what, I should double check everything. That's the person you can't manipulate because they've got too many safety procedures. Even highly trained people like myself know that the number one rule is to be humble, that even with all our training, somebody can get us. In fact, somebody can exploit that training, play up to our expertise, flatter us, and then use that against us. We're always at risk. And when you understand that you're always at risk, you understand that, okay, I need to apply some procedures to keep myself safe and to measure things accurately. And so long as I do that, then I'm neutralizing the risk. Because remember, the brain cannot resist forming neural pathways. As soon as information goes in, it starts rewriting the code. So you can't resist somebody's influence. The brain will automatically ingest that and do something with it and change your belief system. Right? But what you can do is manage how you react to this so that it has the least possible negative impact. So let's talk about the solution. Like I said, it's obviously not particularly helpful to treat everyone with high suspicion as if they're all trying to trick you. It's going to make it hard for you to form relationships, and it's actually being too suspicious. If you suspect everyone, you won't be able to see who the truly bad people are. You'll be sort of stuck in the forest, unable to see the trees. Instead of trying to figure out who's tricking you, you need to live in a way where even if someone was trying to trick you, it wouldn't matter. That's the kind of thing you need to think about here. How can I make it that I'm manipulation proof, where even if I'm being manipulated, it can't hurt my life? There's two things to help you do this, okay? Security checks and safeguards. Now, security checks are regular practices where you double check your view of things to try and make it more accurate, to try and measure what's happening more accurately. So it's acting like I might have been fooled and I don't know where I've been fooled, so I have to check everything. This might mean getting valid feedback from reliable sources, getting other people's opinions on someone or something, asking your therapist to comment on the behavior that you've seen from your partner, trying to find a neutral, valid source or two or three if possible, to go, what do you think of what's happening here? And actually listen to them. If you're deeply in love with your new partner, but your three best friends who have always been there for you are saying he's not good for you, listen to them. They're probably more accurate than you are. Sometimes it means double checking things, even with people you trust. I've got a client at the moment who's trying to deal with fraud related issues in his business. And even if he trusts his accounting and finance people, he should at least do a final check of everything. Look at all the reports, look at all the lines, see if anything stands out as odd to him. Make it known that anybody who's having an influence on your life is going to be checked. And this way, it's really kind of impossible for them to get away with anything. This is one of the number one things I learned working on criminal offenders. Heavy sentencing is not what deters offenders, okay? You can make anything punishable by death and people are still going to do it. What really deters them is the risk of getting caught. If you put 100 security cameras and three security guards in a shop, there's going to be almost no shoplifting. Set up your life where there's a lot of security cameras, where nobody can really get away with anything. This can even mean just being skeptical with yourself, journaling. Have another look at what happened today, what people said, how you felt about it, what effect it had on your behavior. Journal about your patterns with people, how they've treated you in the past, review that over time. You got a good friend, but you feel weird about them. Go, well, why do I feel weird? What things have I seen from them over time? And record like hard data about the way they've treated you or behaved. And then go, if this was somebody else's friend and they wanted feedback, what would I say? And be hard and truthful with yourself about the patterns you're seeing and sort of detach yourself from just the emotions that they bring up in you. Now, second thing, safeguards are anything you put in place in your life to lessen the impact of manipulation. So these are systems and practices and support tactics that kind of reduce the impact somebody can have on you if they are manipulating you. Think of it like an antivirus program on a computer. And it can very much be the use of computers. A lot of manipulation happens online. So having apps and having antivirus programs and having various firewalls in place so that people can't really do stuff to you online. People, for example, if you've got somebody in your business who's in charge of finances, make sure they're only limited to their scope of the finances and they don't have access to anything they don't need access to. And that you have some sort of alert that comes up when big purchases are made so that you're made aware of it and so on. It might mean hiring somebody else to come into your life and it's their job to protect you, somebody who's neutral and paid separately so that, nobody can kind of corrupt them. Again, none of these systems are infallible, but the more systems you have in place, the safer you are. Sometimes people use me for this, and my coaching clients use me for this. Whereas they come and bring what's happening in their life to me, and I'm just this objective source who has only their best interest at heart. And I'll act as the super suspicious one. I'll be like, well, why did they say that? And where's that money gone? And when he did that and he did that, how is he the same person? And I'll ask the questions that they might not be able to ask themselves or that people in their circle wouldn't be willing to ask or able to see. There are thousands of ways to protect yourself. It just requires this humility where you admit that there will be gaps in your armor, that people will be able to get in somewhere, somehow there's a blind spot or a weakness. And you've got to be honest with yourself about what they are. Look at the times you've been manipulated and betrayed in the past. How did they get in? How did you not see this coming? What is your weak spot? Assume that that's still a weak spot for you. Find a way to protect yourself from it. Let's say, for example, I always end up dating horrible people. Or maybe from now on, when I start dating someone, I'm all excited about them. I'll go to my best friend who always warned me about people and say, look at these text messages and tell me what red flags you see. And just have a system where the person can be like, look, they fucking love bombing you. This is just like last time, blah, 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 or whatever. It's also about addressing your behaviors. Again, if you say you're meeting lots of terrible people for dating and you're doing all your dating on online apps, maybe the app's the problem. Maybe you need to go somewhere where the people are likely to be safer, like a dance class or a hiking group, and give yourself better odds and reduce the likelihood that you're, playing with the cesspool of humanity. For example, I have a tendency to get overexcited by new ideas. Okay, I've got that sort of ADHD type trait. And this leads me to jump into things without thinking them through very clearly. Quite often leads me to sign up for like training courses that are quite high cost without doing due diligence. This is always my weakness. So instead of trying to like fix myself, I just make it a rule. I have to run everything past my wife before I pass over my credit card details. Now, her strength is due diligence, right? Her strength is to be skeptical and try to save money. And, she's from the Czech Republic, so she thinks everyone's up to something. And so she'll be my eyes when I'm too excited to see things clearly. And if she says things are no go, I just agree with her and back down. Could just be you wait a week before you pay for something. Let the heat of the sales call wear off before you're allowed to act on it and see if you still feel that way about it. Maybe you're one of those people who believes everything they read on the internet. We're all guilty of that. I mean, that's why this shit is so prolific. It gets into our programming and makes us feel like we're reading the truth. So maybe once a day you choose something that you got all worked up about, and then you go and look for counter evidence, right? You go look at the scientific journals, or you find the people who argue the other side and have a good listen to them, and just open your mind to the idea that you might be wrong. So you put the system in place where you're like, I'm not going to move forward on a belief until I've fully explored the other argument. That's why I love ChatGPT. You just say, I believe this, prove me wrong, and see what comes up. Basically, all I'm saying is let go of your need to trust your own ability to judge and set up a life where you don't need to trust it. You have systems and practices and support in place that will do that work for you. Now, one question I've got to address, what if they get offended? So when I'm doing this work with my clients to help them be more assertive and less able to be manipulated, one of the key things they're worried about is how their friends and family and coworkers are going to feel when they say, hey, I don't trust you. First and foremost, you've got to explain why you're doing this. Now, in most cases, you're not doing this because they've done something that makes you distrust that person specifically. You're doing it because you can't trust your own judgment. So if you go to someone and say, look, the reason I'm being like this with you is because in the past, I trusted someone as much as I trust you right now, and they betrayed me. And so I can't trust my own judgment, and therefore I've got to set up this system to protect me from that happening again. This is not personal, it's not about you, it's about me. Unless, of course, it is about them, and then that's exactly what you say. You promised this thing, but you only did that thing, so now I'm only going to measure your behavior, and that tells me I can't trust you. That's a different conversation. So you're telling people I've been hurt in the past. You can't tell the difference between somebody who's trustworthy and somebody who's really manipulative. So you're going to put the system in place so that you don't get hurt again. Let them know that you're doing this with everyone, family, friends, your partner, your boss, that nobody's getting special treatment here, that this is not specifically targeted at them. You're just protecting yourself in general. It's a new practice that you're bringing in to prevent yourself getting hurt. Their reaction to this will tell you something very interesting. Now, a lot of them will initially be offended until you explain yourself, but a trustworthy person won't actually have a problem with you protecting yourself. The person at the workplace who doesn't do drugs doesn't have a problem with getting drug tested. The person who didn't commit the crime doesn't have a problem with having his fingerprints taken, and so on. So the people who are actually trustworthy are not going to have a problem with you double checking their trustworthiness because they know you're going to find good stuff. So people who are worried about what you're going to find that are going to react badly to this. So if you find that you're asking people to accept that you'll be double checking them to protect yourself because you don't trust your own ability to judge, and that makes them angry and resistant, argumentative and defiant, and they start gaslighting you into thinking you don't need this, they're the person who's got the big red flag over their head now. Okay? They're the one you've got to be worried about. As I said, it would be normal for their first reaction to be a bit defensive, especially if they think they're being accused of something. Once you've made it clear that that's not happening and they've had some time to process this, and they're still super resistant, and they try to work their way around the new barriers that they've put up, or you start finding that they start behaving weird when you're doing your checking practices or your safeguards, that pretty much tells you what you need to know about that person. This one is the threat. Only a manipulative person has a problem with being investigated.